Welcome everybody to this workshop, which is actually two workshops back to back on poster design and creation. So this is the first workshop that's kind of designed to prep students, especially looking towards the GRC Expo. There's another workshop that's going to happen on the 27th. You can sign up for, run by Bruce Kirchhoff and Kim Cooney. That's going to help you extend some of the stuff that you've done here today and really make sure that you have an excellent presentation, both what you're showing people and how you deliver it. Is that a fair enough summation? All right, excellent. So today, for the first part, we are going to talk about just design of posters. Many people who came to this workshop, thanks to our handy online survey, had mentioned they've never designed a poster at all in their life, and that's great. I'm glad you're here. So we are going to go through some basics, and then we'll take a little break, and then after that, we are going to be working in PowerPoint or whatever you want to work in. Most people design their poster presentations in PowerPoint, and actually get into the tool and start sort of playing around with it, working on laying things out, bringing in some content, getting some feedback. One of the consultants from the Digital Act Studio, April Sapp, is here today to help with that as well. So that's our trajectory for today. Just to give you a brief overview of where I'm coming from, the Digital Act Studio is one of the multi-literacy centers here at UNCG. The other two are the Speaking Center and the Writing Center. And we all sort of function the same way. You can bring a project to us and we'll sit down with you and give you feedback on how to make that project more effective. It's just that our purview is different. We work on anything composed, presented, designed digitally. So we work on poster design. We work on podcasts, videos, slide decks for presentations. I recently worked with a grad student who was revising her dissertation presentation and tried to get her away from slides with 150 words on them. You can make an appointment to visit us either face-to-face or we have online consultations as well. So you can stay cozy wherever you are and have an online consultation. If you go to our website, digitalactstudio.uncg.edu, down at right here, I cropped it off. I should really change our screenshot. Right there is a link to scheduling an appointment. So you can make an appointment, again, either online or face-to-face, and we can give you feedback on things like poster design, presentations, videos, e-portfolios. If y'all are going on the job market, I would recommend getting an e-portfolio together so your potential employers can look for that. I was just talking with Greg Bell in the graduate school, and he said that's the first thing he does when he gets applicants, is he always Googles them, finds their website. So you should have one. So we can help you with all of that through sort of non-directive consultations. Any questions about the Digital Act Studio? Either from you all or?
Do you also work with faculty staff outside of that?
We work with anybody that's part of the UNCG community. So we work with alumni. We worked with a Girl Scout troop. So yes, we work with faculty, staff, students, yeah, anybody. Yeah.
How about somebody outside of the university? You said you do work with people outside of the university.
So they have to be like a part of the community. Yeah, so the question was for those online, if people outside the university can use us. And if you have a connection here, so like working with an alumnus, that's fine. But if it's just somebody who's looking for free sort of graphic design help, who has no affiliation whatsoever, I can steer them to some resources online. So, okay. Any other questions about the Digital Act Studio? ACT, by the way, stands for Action, Consultation, and Training. I always forget to mention that. All right. So today we're going to start talking about design, about poster design. Posters are weird. They are sort of a strange thing that is going to accomplish a lot of goals, and you need to be thoughtful about the goals that you have, and you need to be predicating all of your choices for your posters based upon your audience. Oftentimes, when we create a poster for our research, we are so into our research that we only think about this half of it. We think about how I want to represent my research, how I'm going to talk about it to like people in my very narrow community. But that's not what the GRC Expo or really any poster session is. Your poster exists in a relationship with your audience. And you need to be predicating your design decisions, how you craft your research, what you highlight, how you organize it, based upon that audience. So this can be difficult for something like the GRC Expo because you have a very broad audience. You aren't just talking to other PhDs in your narrow field. So what's your field? Yeah, nutrition. So it's not just going to be nutrition people there. So you have to be able to talk to somebody in history. That's a very difficult thing. Posters, when you are designing them, you have to remind yourself of that. You have to have a critical understanding of your audience and predicate what you are doing based upon that understanding. Posters also exist in sort of a weird space where they need to be a great aid as you stand there and present to your audience. Hi, welcome. Come on in. They need to really aid the minute or so you are engaging with somebody in the moment, but they also need to be able to stand alone. So during the GRC Expo, I don't know if there's time where nobody is going to be there and people are just wandering around, but this is the way that professional poster sessions are done. Posters are left up for potentially days, and people just walk by and they engage them. This also means that you have sort of a tricky balance that posters need to do sort of two things. They need to reward somebody who skims through it. It needs to be designed in a way that if I spent 30 seconds on it, I could get like your main point. I could get your main idea of your research. At the same time, it also needs to reward somebody who spends the time to sit there and goes through the entirety of it. So there are all of these balances that we have to negotiate when dealing with designing posters. Remember the audience. Always remember the audience. That is one of the key things. So those are sort of my preliminary points that if you fall asleep now, just remember those things that they will get you far in poster design. But now we are going to get into three real sort of important areas in anatomizing poster design: the structure, the content, and the style. After that, since most of you have never done a poster before or are going to be working in PowerPoint, very briefly I'll show you some PowerPoint tips, and then we'll get into free work time. And also, this is and should be an engaging and informal presentation. So if you have any questions at any time, and this goes for people virtually as well, chime in and ask your question, and we'll deal with it in the moment. Sound good? All right. So let's talk about structure. So when you think about, you have this canvas, this 48-inch by 36-inch canvas, and you are going to spew forth your research onto it. How should you actually arrange that in order for it to communicate to your audience? There are going to be some general standard things that you want to do. So title, top center with author names underneath. Then what we expect as readers is we're going to start top left. So we'll start over here, and we're going to read down and over in columns. That is the expectation that we have. And we'll see in a little bit sort of what happens when we don't get that expectation. So that is what people are expecting. That's how people are expecting to engage posters. You title at the top, the content below, columnated format, left to right. Now, what should that format, what should those sections that you encounter actually be? Well, that depends on your discipline, and every discipline is going to be a little bit different. In general, most posters follow sort of an IMRAD, introduction, methods, results and discussion, results conclusion format. The idea here is that you generally follow a logical or chronological order to your research. I don't think that's particularly groundbreaking to anybody. But again, if you're reading from top left to bottom right, there should be sort of a logical flow and structure to all of this. That order needs to be explicit and very clear. Even though people expect to start in the top left, make sure that your section titles are clear and differentiated from your text and all that. So here is a poster on rapid field deployable diagnostics to fight the war on dengue. I can get into this in a second, but I'll just ask you, what do you all think? Yeah.
So you were talking about using kind of a certain structure.
Yeah.
History, we're kind of like telling a story. So do you have
Mhm.
recommendations of how to structure it where it's not as, I mean, our chapter.
Yeah, like 2 slides away.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
great.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to sort of disciplinary considerations for humanities stuff, and history is social science humanities stuff, but yeah, we'll get there in just a minute.
So
Yep.
someone online made a comment that there's a lot of small text, and someone online said the background is distracting.
Yeah, so stylistically, yes, I completely agree. Having full photographic backgrounds is generally very distracting, and there is a lot of small text here. If you look at the background section in the upper left, that is just sort of a wall of text. I mean, do any of you want to like sit and read it? No. And I imagine it's not going to be very useful as sort of a visual aid when you're standing there and presenting with it. That it's not like you aren't going to say to the person, your interlocutor, like, wait, stop for a second and just read this paragraph and then we'll talk again. So I'm not sure that that is an effective choice. I should mention, with all of the examples that I show today, we are doing something wildly unfair to them, which is removing them from their contexts in which they were presented, and then thinking about what things we like and don't like. So it is a bit unfair. And these could be wildly successful posters depending on the audience. Yeah.
And that's what I was just about to say. I was like, I actually really like that background, but I'm very visual. I just think the organization of the boxes should just be better and maybe wider.
Okay.
So that, you won't be looking at the background as much, but you can focus more on and if the organization of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
boxes are better, it'll be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is anyone confused by the structure of this?
One-sided. Well, I put you on one side and the other side.
They just have like these 3 picture clumps. Yeah. In terms of the overall structure of it, we begin here with background. That makes sense to everybody. Purpose, hypothesis, we get materials and methods. We have some results, and we have results discussion, then conclusion and references over here. So we are sort of breaking this up with sort of odd groupings of images. We have small text. But from a structural standpoint, it's not impeding us from sort of getting how it works. So let's take a look at another example. This one was given to talk about a course that was created. And so it doesn't follow a research pattern. It follows a more narrative pattern. Here we go. Service learning in an introductory oceanography course. So we all get to start at the title, like that makes sense, but where do we go from there? What is the reading pattern that we should have? So this, yeah, so not sure where to look in what order. This is, if you look at this for a little while, you'll probably figure out what the order that they had, and likely when the person was next to them, it would probably make sense. But I mean, here's the title. Then here's sort of the central idea, the 8 steps to including service learning. And the way to read those 8 steps are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could likely get there, but at the same time, when you're presenting your poster, it's not necessarily it's not a time to make somebody sort of puzzle through your organizational structure. If somebody's wandering by everything and is just skimming through these, you don't want to bog somebody down in sort of picking through this organizational structure. Yeah.
In terms of the actual, the way they laid it out with the colors, because at first glance, I sort of followed the pattern that they were following.
Mm-hmm.
My only thought was that it becomes washed out with the colors they choose if they're intended for readers to follow a pattern if they're not present to talk through it.
Yeah, so this is a fairly subtle, so if you notice the top 3 ovals are white, the next 3 ovals are the like bluish of the background, and the bottom 3 ovals are darker blue, and that's their sort of design strategy to let you see these as a group, like read these 3, read these 2, read these 3. That's fine, but it is very subtle. And if you really needed somebody to read a poster in a non-standard order, like it has to be very obvious that that's the way that you want to do it. Yeah. Any other comments? Cool. So let's talk about times where the scientific method or sort of a chronological approach to a research study doesn't really apply. So this is true for history, for English. We had a couple people in English sign up. Is anyone English here? Okay, they may be online now. All right, cool. The key thing, so there are sort of overarching principles that you always need to maintain, and the key thing there is that you have a clear and logical order. Likely, if you are building to, do you want to give an idea of what you're particularly working on?
Like, do you have a quick synopsis of it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm writing a dissertation about Varplant, which was the first implantable birth control device.
Okay.
It was FDA approved in 1990. So I'm looking at it from its development in the 60s within the population control movement, all the way to 2002 when it's taken off the market after over 200 class action lawsuits ruin its reputation. So I'm examining it through that as well as feminism and social policy, particularly neoliberalism and the next one.
Okay, so you have multiple sort of strands that you have a theoretical framework that you're looking with, you have a historical like narrative that you are telling as well. When you're weaving together these multiple things, you should do a couple of things. One is to sort of work backwards. So think about where you want your audience to end up, what your conclusion sort of is, where you are going with this. That's always actually sort of just a useful tool for any research you've done, like, what was the point of my research here? And think about the necessary sections in order to do that. I've seen many poster presentations where they have historical narrative that they present in sort of the introduction. Then they include the theoretical or the theoretical frameworks that have been applied to its interpretation. And then the last column is your sort of intervention, what you are adding to or modifying for the theoretical framework. So, and that leads to sort of your conclusory state. It doesn't have to be listed as conclusion, but it can be, reinterpreting the blank. And that is a sufficient sort of section title that people will know what is going on. Yeah?
One of the things I can say from working with the expos for the years that we have is the judges always say, why does it matter to me? All that research that you're doing, everything that you're doing with creativity, it's great, but why does it matter to anyone else but you or your, department, your area? Why does it matter to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and remember the context for this. The GRC Expo is not your specific, just your people who have PhDs in this exact same thing, for whom the question, why does it matter to me, is already answered because they've spent their life studying this. That you have a much broader audience, and that is a very useful exercise. And it will lead to, I think, a much better poster by being able to answer just that question. Like, can I tell somebody why knowing this matters? Yeah. Do you want me to repeat, audience?
I've been trying to kind of sum it up. Someone online said your thesis sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
And yeah. So for me, I like to sort of like start from the conclusion, where I want people to end up, where I want people to be, and sort of work back. What sections do I need to get there? You can, if you want to, adopt sort of scientific language, the IMRAD approach. We'll see that in a second. So here is a poster based on, well, Unexpected Friends, shared Roman Batavian discourses as reflections on political freedom under the empire in Tacitus. So what we see here is, we actually do have a conclusion section, but we are building to that with sort of blocks of information. We aren't introduction, methods. We have sort of the tools that we are going to build our conclusion out of as essential parts. And when somebody reads this, as a standalone thing, they're able to see like that structuring happening. So that is one approach you can do. You can adopt, again, the sort of IMRAD approach if you want to. And under your methods section, you can do things like describe the theoretical frameworks that have previously been applied to this work of literature. And then under results, you can do things like have a close reading, and then in conclusions, summarize your sort of intervention into the discourse. So you can adopt that as well. It's a stretch, but it's possible. Any other questions about the structure of posters and how it might work flexibly? Yeah.
I just want to ask about the reference section. Should I add that reference? Because for example, I have too many references. So
Yeah.
what should I do with that?
So in general, the very last thing is references. You can do a lot of things because this is not a novel problem. So oftentimes what people do is they put all of their references in, they highlight it, and now it's going to be like 6-point font on your poster. That's generally not great. If it's going to be so small that it's unreadable, then why have it? I have had seen people hang, so your poster is hanging up, and they will have like a file folder that hangs down with sheets of paper that have all of their references in them. I have had people who have taken the approach that, yes, I have a lot of references, but I'm only putting in my reference section the things that are on my poster, which is hopefully not everything. So that limits things too. I've also had people who make a QR code. I don't know anybody who really uses QR codes. But you can make like a little web address as well at the bottom, so somebody could take out their phone and find your references. Like you can make it just a Google Doc or a website with all of your references on them too. So yeah, there's multiple things. My suggestion would be your references are for your poster, and that will likely eliminate 80 of your references. So
There are some online
Mhm.
questions. The poster presentation that I'm doing is for proposed research that I haven't completed yet. How
Mhm.
does this change the structure and design of the poster?
So really you're going to be describing sort of the impetus for the research. You are going to be giving like background, formulating your research question. And then instead of having like results and conclusion, you're likely going to sort of speculate on the intervention of it, like what is, how this is going to change things. It's also the case there that like, when you look at these poster examples, we generally have 3 or 4 columns. The last column is all conclusion, the middle is all data. You're really going to stretch out sort of all of the, up through methods. You're really going to stretch all of that out across these multiple columns. So get into sort of what you are going to do and why, if that helps at all. I keep looking at you, Sam. Yeah, what you're going to do and why.
Someone else asked, would it be possible to like print on the back side of your poster for references? And he adds, P.S. I have clearly never made a poster before.
So no. Your poster is going to be like push pinned or binder clipped to a giant piece of cardboard generally. And so somebody would literally have to take your poster down in order to see the back of it. So we don't want to print things on the back that you want people to see. I guess you could, I don't know, have your kid draw like a good luck drawing on the back, just about. But yeah, don't put things on the back of the poster because literally no one will see them. Awesome. Good questions. Any other questions about structuring the poster? Yeah. I think that's usually better. So when you have, let's go back here. So this has sort of a lengthy results section to it. In general, you want to simplify data, charts, tables, graphs, so that they're fairly self-explanatory and the values or the information, the data that you got out of it's highlighted in some way, so that you don't need now another paragraph that really explains, like, in figure 1, notice this value, but it's very evident sort of through the visual representation of that data what they should be getting. We'll get to that in just a little bit in the content. Any other questions? Cool. So we have sort of a structure in mind of ways that we might tackle this now. What should we be putting up there? One of the chief things to remember about posters is that they're not papers. It is a visual medium that you are communicating in. They are just sort of valued and effective in different ways than papers are. There's a lot of stuff that carries over, like really honing your arguments, creating a logical order to the evidence that you're presenting, but they aren't quite papers. One of the first things that we need to worry about is what to put at the top. How do we title our research? I'll say it again because it's always true. It always depends on your audience. For the GRC broad audience, so we really want to avoid jargon. It also needs to be concise so that somebody walking by can get it. They can read your title. It's not going to be 4 lines of text like smushed up at the top. Generally, don't break. 2 lines is really pushing it for your whole title. So don't go past that. You want something that grabs their attention, but not in the sense of like you've put glitter on it. What you want to pique somebody's interest. So you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sort of frequently describe sort of the process or the approach you have to this research that is likely novel, or you can hint at or just outright state sort of your findings, your conclusion. That often gives somebody impetus to actually read this. If you go for that latter one to sort of state where your research went and what was cool that you found out, be a little bit careful, as usually that's sort of only speaks to people in your immediate circle. I'm not quite sure why this novel approach to synthesizing, I don't know, I'm out of my league here, synthesizing some chemical is actually valuable. So be careful with that for very broad audiences. And remember that getting back to the being able to express why does this matter to somebody is if you can get that, something like that in your title, gesture towards that. That's going to help people want to engage your project, and it's always going to provide sort of an anchor for somebody going through your project. Yeah?
Now, everyone has already submitted the title and the abstract, but you will have, that information will be sent back to you, and so you will have the opportunity to change your title. There'll be opportunity to review your abstract and make changes to your abstract. I believe that they'll be due about February 28th, so the after Bruce's workshop as well, so you'll have a little bit of time, and then final copy was due back to us before like your spring break. So this is the time to kind of be thinking about the things that you want to change, so when that information comes back to you, you'll be able to turn back around and make changes.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right, just shout. Yeah.
Yeah, Kayla just confirmed, said that, so they can change it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
When you mention attracting the audience,
Mhm.
about the point that you mean the rationale for the research? Should I mention the rationale why I'm doing this research?
So if that's expressed in your title, so it can be the reason this research is important is because it's intersecting a current need. So if I am working on the opioid epidemic, but my research is very specific about some sort of niche public health practice, I would likely put the opioid epidemic in my title, as that is more sort of relatable to a general audience than this niche practice. So that can be, but it shouldn't be a long-winded explanation at the front. Your rationale for many of us is a story. So just be careful with putting the rationale up there. It should be something sort of recognizable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're going to have your title, work on it, think of something that will invite a reader in, that's concise, captures what you are going to be talking about and what your poster is about. When you get into the text that you are actually going to give them, this is a place where a lot of people sort of wrote a paper and then they copied and pasted it onto their poster, and that's not very effective. In general, you want to avoid operating in like a paragraph mode. And we often, as grad students, as academics, write long paragraphs. We generally want to avoid that. We should try to be as concise as possible. In general, posters are about 300 to 800 words. They aren't terribly long. And you can do a lot in order to change around text. You can implement lists, you can shorten things, let a chart, table, graph speak for itself. Make sure that it's clear, but you can let it speak for itself. So there's lots that you can do. When you get into sections, really keep it concise and brief. When you are emphasizing things, you are going to have certain elements. So for a lot of people in sort of the background section, so even if you're giving like the historical overview, it's going to lead to sort of an inflection point. If you are giving a background where you're leading to a hypothesis, it's going to have sort of one like crystallized form of sort of the main key impetus for this entire research. It can be helpful if we think about sort of that 30-second view of this research to emphasize those things by like bolding them, or you could italicize them, or put them perhaps in a different color. Those sorts of things emphasizing helps make your poster skimmable. I wouldn't go the route of like just emphasizing all the keywords you think. The more you emphasize, the less emphatic anything is. But if you're thinking about trying to make this poster skimmable for somebody, using emphasis for like your hypothesis or main research question, like a key finding in your result, and your conclusion. Like give them 3 things, then in 30 seconds they really can like get a broad view of your research and know what you like have to say. When you do emphasize stuff, like just do one thing and do it consistently. Don't keep doing different things. Don't be inconsistent. Any questions about that? Talk about visual concision now. All right, so I want to mention visual concision briefly. This is a poster is a visual argument. You're laying out a lot of things on there. What often happens is people get textual concision very easily. They understand like, all right, I know not too many words, right? Good. But they delete some words and they have large empty spaces on their poster. And so they decide like, lots of images. We're just going to put all of the images in here. You need to be thoughtful about what you are putting up in terms of your images. They should be doing work and they should be relatively easy to digest. So there are, for many of us, we do data visualizations, certain like 3D scatter plots that aren't really going to translate to a general audience. Oftentimes the ways we represent, we have a table in our dissertation that has 300 different sort of values in it. Nobody in a general audience is going to sit there at that table and like puzzle through all of these values. You need to be as visually concise as possible, and the driving force behind that is think about what work these visuals are doing for you. And yeah, you just put up what you need to get to your conclusion. You don't need to put up all of the information you've ever collected, just what you need to get you to that conclusion. All right, so here is a poster done in 2012 at the University of Michigan. This is, so you see a couple of things that they've done here, that they've actually eliminated sort of a lot of text. We have even sort of in the abstract, this has become a list so somebody can go through it very easily. My own opinion is generally don't put abstracts on posters, but we can debate about that if you'd like. as we go through it, well, I guess I'll let you all say, do you have any reactions or thoughts about this poster?
Yeah, it's too much language.
Okay.
And someone online said that the conference that they're going to present a poster requires them that they put abstracts on the poster.
That's fine. There's I'll say my spiel here. So a couple of, like, if you're required to, obviously, of course, a lot of conferences I go to, I get an abstract like book, or it's like on my phone in an app. And in which case, if I'm creating a poster, I like to use that real estate for like other things. And then the last thing is that usually when I create a poster, I want it to be skimmable in a way that in 30 seconds, somebody can sort of get the main points that would be in an abstract. But yeah, make sure you pay attention to like the requirements for size of posters and required sections. You don't want to break any of those.
It assumes that I know what you're talking about.
In here,
This poster, it assumes that I know what all of these symbols mean.
yeah, so in terms of, like for the GRC Expo broad audience, we may try to use a different title. We may, is more relatable to that broad audience. Some of these things, just like what is going on here. Again, if we're thinking of a broad audience, we may want to explain a little bit more what is going on in that equation. Again, we're doing something really unfair with these posters and pulling them out of their presentation context and holding them up here. But for the GRC Expo, yeah, getting more things that have more traction amongst a broader audience. Laura, you had?
And I was going to say, your abstract will be put into a booklet to be given to the judges and the people coming into the expo. So the information that you provide us, like your title, your authors, your abstract, and that. But I mean, with that said, I would still put my authors on my poster. I don't think you need to put your abstracts on your poster, but and like your pathway mentors will be in the program, things like that. So that some of that stuff you don't have to put on your poster, but all that stuff will be fed back to you. So you'll get a snapshot of what's going to be in the program, and then you go to proof it and then send it back to us for clarification. And we might at some point say, like, if you get too many authors and we're running out of room, we might say you're going to have to cut something somewhere.
So yeah, you generally always want, I often see faculty mentors listed under titles as well. Sometimes that may or may not stay. Your names always have to be on the poster. You always want that to persist. But yeah, abstract, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
It's also good to put the logo. We don't require the logo, the UNCG logo, but especially if you're going to graduate research and if you're going to the May legislation day, you're going to have to put the logo on there. So I would recommend putting the UNCG logo on there.
Yeah, and it's very common to put it like here, up in the title area. Some people have sort of an acknowledgement section where they like paste all of their logos down there too. But in general, most people have their logos up in the title section.
And we don't require references. You could put a link on your poster. I mean, that's an idea that you might think about. Like if you have a lot of references, you could say my references are at, and then you could give a link.
Cool. All right. So let's move from this poster to this poster. This is an old poster done at Cornell. It's done in 2002. Boy, the time flies. Y'all ask good questions. So I'm just going to highlight some things here. So again, unfair to do this to any poster. Some of these like smaller charts and graphs are getting to be at the point where they're small enough that somebody's going to have a difficult time reading them and really getting what information is important out of them without like reading your whole results section. So be careful to make sure that the information you want somebody to gain from your data visualizations, charts, tables, graphs is clear, is sort of self-evident. This also operates in sort of a paragraph mode. And I don't remember the conference that this was presented at, but that may have been sort of expected there. But in general nowadays, people expect not to encounter just sort of long paragraphs of text. Things are much more broken up, much more easy to read and to skim. Any questions or thoughts real quick? All right. So when thinking about other disciplines, this is true for a lot of disciplines that do scholarship that is primarily text-based articles. It's very hard for them to think, well, what am I going to do with all of this space? Remember your audience, that the types of visual aids you may include are to reach that audience. So if I'm doing a poster about research that I do on the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn, it may be sort of hokey from my perspective to put like what a Grecian urn, like a picture of a Grecian urn on it, but there are a lot of people who have no context for what that means, that it might be helpful for. So think about incorporating visuals that will help your audience sort of come into your discourse. Also, think about stylizing your text in different ways. As you build sort of the components of your arguments leading towards your conclusion, that might be stylized in different ways. If we go back here, so we have a bust of Tacitus at the bottom. So again, if I'm just doing classics, like it's just a classics conference, like, well, everybody knows what a marble bust looks like. Why are we doing this? But if it's a more general conference, like this can have a lot of sort of a point of ingress for your audience. Also, they add some visual appeal by here's a key term that they're going to define, and so they set it off in a different box. It's a larger font style. So they've designed their text more in order to engage their audience more visually. So you still have options if your field operates primarily in a textual mode. All right, that brings us to style. So let's talk about the images that wind up on posters. They're often not the best. I see a lot of sort of poster image atrocities that happen. You need to make sure that the images that you put up are clear and not pixelated. If you need to do the math, so if you have an image that is 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, and you are going to be printing it at 150 dots per inch, it can't be the entire background to your poster. It will look terrible. It will look very pixelated. So you have to make sure that your images aren't stretched beyond their capacity. You also have to make sure that your images don't get skewed. So this image right here got squished, and now we have a very squished person. We should always maintain the original proportions of our images so that we don't have these weird, skewed, flattened images. When you do put pictures of people up, and people like to see other pictures of people, it makes your research sort of more relatable, more inviting. One of the key things is don't flip them, or don't flip this image around so that the person's looking out of your poster. Have them sort of looking into your poster. It's a weird thing, but when people's sight lines go out of the boundaries of your poster, it just looks sort of odd. All right, yeah, in general, don't have full photographic backgrounds to stuff. Usually it gets really pixelated. It's not expected or common or standard. In terms of fonts, most posters use a sans serif font. So serif fonts are things like Times New Roman, Garamond, Georgia. Serif fonts look older, more formal, more like print. If I were doing a poster on Shakespeare or Hemingway, I might use a serif font. But most posters use sans serif fonts, like Arial, Helvetica, etc. You want to avoid decorative fonts, especially Comic Sans and Papyrus. These are the most derided fonts in existence. And visually, if somebody sees that, like they're gonna, sorry, but they will mock your poster. And that's sort of not how you want to engage your audience. Also, when you're thinking about sizing your fonts, everything is relative, but you need to make sure that it's communicating your informational hierarchy. So, obviously your title should be the biggest thing. If it's not, and somebody has to hunt for your title, it's sort of an immediate failure of the poster design. So section titles should be next biggest. Body text should be smaller than that. References and captions tend to be even smaller than that. You don't want anything that's unreadable, but there's also no absolute rules. I put these font sizes up here just as, I don't know, about this maybe. Yeah, any questions about fonts? Cool. Color. In general, you'll want to pick a color that goes with your topic. If you are presenting sort of at an institutional event, you may want to pick UNCG colors, navy and gold. Use them sparingly. You might have a navy background to your title. Don't make your entire poster gold. That would be odd. You generally want to establish a color palette that works with your content. If I'm doing a poster on solar energy, I might use green or yellow accents. You generally want to avoid really saturated, warm colors for big parts of your poster. Like if all of your text boxes are bright red, it's not going to be easy to read. People will feel sort of accosted by the colors that you've used. When you have a color palette, don't venture too far out of it. Sort of stick to it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if you are looking for logos or brand colors, you can go to the University of Communications brand guide website, and they give you all the color information, the logo information, that type of stuff that you can download right there from their website if you're looking for that type of thing on your poster. You don't have to use those, but I mean, that's where you get a logo and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And they have the vertical and the horizontal.
The University of Communications is called Brand Guide.
Yes, ma'am?
Someone online said, could you use a bold background color and neutral boxes for info?
You can. I have a couple of recommendations. Don't do transparency in the boxes. Don't do gradients in the boxes. And those boxes, if they've really got to be like white or very light gray. Don't think like a pretty brown beige is neutral. That term neutral color is what sort of gave me pause. So it's really got to be incredibly high contrast between the things, between the text and the background. And in general, you want black text on a white background, not white text on a black background. Okay. So this actually gets into that. One of the things that's important to remember when designing posters is don't keep on designing things to fix problems that you have created for yourself. So I would recommend avoiding transparency in boxes and with your text, and avoiding color gradients. Oftentimes these are a sign that you have started down a design path that is causing you problems, and instead of fixing those problems, you just keep trying to design around it. So if for some reason you decide to have an image as your background, and then you put a text box on top of it, but then you realize you've cut off this person's head, so now it looks a little bit odd to have this sort of shadow person behind you. So now we're going to make it sort of transparent so you can see them, but now things are getting less sort of legible, and then we're going to add sort of a transparent gradient. This is my transparent gradient title on top of it. This is too much. If you find yourself trying to design around problems, that's always a good sign to take a step back and sort of rearrange things. Your design should be relatively simple and accessible. Don't try to add layers of complexity on top of it. All right, so here is, Ian, we started 5 minutes late, so I've got like 1 minute left. So here's a poster from the White House Science Fair back in 2012. This is the situation you will find yourself in, but Barack couldn't make it. So you'll have somebody else just standing there looking at your poster, you're talking with them. You can see that the style that they've incorporated here is fairly basic, but it's very serviceable. We know where each section starts, all of the text is clear, the fonts are large enough. So it's not the most exciting design, but if somebody's interested in your research, they're going to have such an easy time accessing it, and they're going to be engaged with your research. This is one of the most sort of designy posters that I found that I think is still very successful. You'll notice that they've done a lot of things. So this is one that has a bold background color, this teal, and they've used very, very light tan boxes on it. Everything is very consistent. They have these faux ribbon bends. Everything is also very flat. You notice that they have some bolding for key areas. They've implemented lists. Everything is fairly succinct. If you look over to the right, their conclusion is actually in this little box, so that if you had 10 seconds, you could kind of see the most important thing that they want to give you, a fairly brief table. So yeah, you do have, if you want to, you can get way into designing this poster sort of any way you want. It's just being sort of, recognizing where your design is aiding an audience member engaging your information and when it is not. All right. Any thoughts about these posters real quick? All right, cool. I like to show this. Zen Fox created this. It's called Bad Poster Bingo. Do not print this out and take it around with you, but use it when you're drafting your own poster about this. So things like, having a bunch of boxes within boxes within boxes is not good. Vertical writing, if you have a lot of vertical writing, somebody's going to have to tilt their head to the side. Having all caps for a lot of things. Using institutional logos, so I see this frequently. Somebody has centered their title. They put their UNCG logo on the left and the right. Like no, don't do that. You just need it one time. You don't want to underline things. So I would encourage you to use this when you're designing your poster. Read through it, see if you do any of these, and realize that, yeah, maybe you should try something different there. All right, any questions about style? Okay. I wanted to go through these PowerPoint tips really quickly before we get into our PowerPoint session. Yeah?
Sorry, someone asked about vertical posters.
Yeah. So for the GRC Expo, they ask for things to be 48 by 36. So there are vertical posters, and in general, you're going to operate in a 2-column format, left and right. Vertical posters do lend themselves more to a top to bottom sectioning as well, where you can use vertical titles on the left to say like what this section 1, introduction, and then you have a span for the entire thing. So you can't, it works better for vertical posters, but still many of them do a sort of standard columnated format. Yeah, good question. All right, so some quick things in PowerPoint to help you make posters. The first is, well, I don't want a slide, I want a poster. If you go to the Design tab, Custom Slide Size, that's where you make a poster. That's where you go from making a PowerPoint slide to making something 48 inches wide and 36 inches tall. Then this slide becomes your canvas upon which you can place all of your text boxes, all of your, sorry, I keep standing in front of you, all of your text boxes, all of your images, and it's very easy to work with. Most people design their posters in PowerPoint, export them as PDFs, and get them printed out. Slide Master View. This one's a fun one. Many of you will likely use a template for your poster. Dax has created a few templates for you if you want to have a very bare bones template that you can start with. Oftentimes, templates are great until they're not, and you have to change something. If you go to View and then Slide Master, this opens up the template as editable. This makes the sort of that color box, that color block on this poster, now it just becomes like any other color block, and you can click it, delete it, do whatever you want with it. So if you are using a template and are having trouble with it, the Slide Master View is where you want to go to fix that. The next thing is you're going to have text and images together. So to arrange these so that, sometimes your image is going over your text, you can right-click, command-click. You can do this a few other ways through the menu. but you're going to want to send backwards and forwards your various elements so that what needs to be on top is going to be on top. So send backward or send forward is a key PowerPoint tool. Finally, Smart Art. So I don't know if you all have used Smart Art in PowerPoint before. It's great for creating like a more kind of cool graphical list, but it's also, it puts some handcuffs around you because ultimately you won't be able to really edit a lot of parts of it. If you go to the Smart Art tools and go to Design, and go over to the right, there is a Convert box where you can take that Smart Art and convert it to shapes. Then you can infinitely edit anything here. You could delete the arrow in the back. I can delete pieces of this. I can rearrange everything. So I see a lot of Smart Art on posters because it is sort of nice, but sometimes you need a little bit more flexibility. Convert it to shapes. All right, and we will work on that in the next hour if you want to hang around. Templates. Oftentimes programs will have templates. We have a template that you can use at go.uncg.edu/dax poster PPT. For those of you here, I'll write it up on the board once we're done here. Check with your program, though. They may have a template that they sort of want you to use. And now, since you know how to get to that slide master view, or you can just make a one big, giant blank slide, you can also make your own templates. You can roll your own. All right. Are there any questions? Any other questions about posters, their design? Yeah.
Someone online asked about thoughts on self-promotion on posters, such as Twitter, email, website, in the bottom right corner.
That's fine. So remember that nobody can click on it. So I usually, well, what I mean is sometimes I see people just have like the Twitter icon, the Instagram icon, and what can I do with that information? So oftentimes having like the Twitter icon / and your username is fine. Depending on I would ask sort of your advisor if you're going out to another event. I think it's something like the GRC Expo. I mean, Laura, you may answer. I think it's perfectly fine. Yeah, but if you're going out to certain professional events, I would just ask your advisor to see sort of how, I don't know, uptight everybody is. And base it on that.
The other suggestion is maybe have business cards too.
Yeah.
That you can hand out.
Mm-hmm. Business cards, also good. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you all for listening to me talk for so long. Thank you for everybody online for tuning in. I appreciate it. This will be up as a recording later if you want to reference it ever again. Yeah, thank you.